If you ask most people what killed Elvis Presley, they'll give you the same answer. Drugs, exhaustion, poor health. But what if every one of those answers only tells you how he died, not why? Because the truth begins years before that lonely morning, long before the ambulances, long before the headlines, long before the world watched the king disappear. It begins with a secret so carefully hidden that millions of fans never realized it was happening. The greatest enemy Elvis Presley ever faced was never standing in front of him. It was standing beside him, smiling, guiding him, protecting him, and slowly taking away everything that made him free. This isn't the story you've heard 100 times. This isn't another biography about the king of rock and roll. This is the story of a man who conquered the world, but never realized the world had quietly conquered him. Every empire has a beginning. Every tragedy has a first mistake. For Elvis Presley, those two moments were the same. Before the screaming crowds, before Hollywood, before Graceland, before the white jumpsuits became legendary. There was only a shy young man from a poor family in Mississippi. He wasn't chasing fame. He wasn't chasing fortune. He simply wanted to give his parents the life they had never been able to afford. Music was never supposed to make him a legend. It was supposed to save his family. No one could have imagined what happened next. The moment America heard his voice, everything changed. His sound didn't belong to one generation, it belonged to the future. Young people saw freedom. Older generations saw danger. Some believed he was changing music forever. Others believed he was destroying it. But whether they loved him or hated him, they couldn't look away. Within what felt like a single heartbeat, Elvis Presley stopped being a young man. He became an obsession. The crowds became larger every week. His records disappeared from store shelves almost as quickly as they arrived. Television wanted him. Hollywood wanted him. The world wanted him. It looked like the greatest success story in American history. But history has a cruel habit. It never shows you the chains while they're still being forged. Every concert brought louder applause. Every movie brought bigger paychecks. Every contract brought another opportunity. And every opportunity quietly took away another piece of his freedom. At first, no one noticed. Not even Elvis. Why would he? Everything around him looked like success. The cars became more expensive. The houses became bigger. The stages became brighter. The crowds became louder. It felt like he was rising higher than anyone had ever dreamed. In reality, something else was rising with him. A machine. One that never slept. One that never slowed down. One that demanded more movies, more concerts, more appearances, more money, and less of the young man who had started the journey. Standing at the center of that machine was one man, Colonel Tom Parker. To the public, he looked like a genius, the man who had taken an unknown singer from Mississippi and turned him into the biggest entertainer on earth. And that wasn't a lie. Without Parker, the world might never have known Elvis Presley. But the most dangerous prisons are never built by enemies. They're built by people you trust, people who convince you they're protecting you, people who slowly make themselves impossible to live without. Elvis believed Parker was protecting his future. He had no reason to think otherwise. Every decision Parker made seemed brilliant. More money, more fame, more opportunities, more success. It all looked perfect, until perfection became a prison. One movie became another, then another. The same roles, the same stories, the same routine.
Concert after concert, contract after contract, year after year.
The king kept giving the world everything it wanted. But no one stopped to ask a terrifying question. What did Elvis want? Somewhere beneath the lights, beneath the applause, beneath the fame that the entire world envied, the young man from Mississippi was beginning to disappear. Almost nobody noticed. Because legends don't collapse all at once. They disappear one piece at a time. A little freedom, a little privacy, a little trust, a little peace. Until one day, there is almost nothing left. And the cruelest part? The world keeps clapping, without realizing the person they're celebrating is quietly falling apart. But losing control of his career was only the beginning. The next battle wouldn't be fought over music, or money, or fame. It would be fought inside his own home. And once the people closest to Elvis Presley began turning against him, the king would discover that betrayal cuts far deeper than any enemy ever could. The first thing Elvis Presley lost wasn't his health, it wasn't his marriage, it wasn't even his freedom. It was something far more dangerous. The ability to know who truly loved him. The higher Elvis climbed, the harder it became to separate genuine loyalty from hidden ambition. Everywhere he looked, people were smiling. People were applauding. People were promising they wanted nothing but the best for him. But fame has a cruel way of changing human nature. The closer someone stood to the king, the more valuable that position became. Some wanted influence. Some wanted money. Some wanted power. Others simply wanted to stay close enough to the spotlight that they would never have to leave it. At first, Elvis never questioned any of it. Why would he? These were the people he laughed with, the people who traveled beside him, the people who stood backstage before every concert, the people who called him family. But history has taught us one painful lesson. Sometimes, the people closest to a throne become the first to fight over it. As the years passed, Elvis's world grew larger. His homes became more luxurious. His concerts became more spectacular. His wealth became almost impossible to comprehend. Yet strangely, his life became smaller. He could no longer walk through a city alone. He couldn't trust ordinary conversations. Every handshake carried expectations. Every friendship carried obligations. Every new face wanted something. The king who belonged to everyone no longer belonged to himself. Then came Graceland. To millions of fans, it looked like paradise. A magnificent mansion, luxury beyond imagination, the home of a living legend. But behind those famous gates, another reality was quietly taking shape. The house was always full. Friends, employees, bodyguards, relatives, visitors. The music never seemed to stop. The laughter echoed through the halls. Cars came and went at every hour. From the outside, it looked like the happiest place on earth. But appearances can be deceiving, because a house filled with people can still be the loneliest place in the world. As Elvis became more famous, fewer people dared to tell him the truth. No one wanted to disappoint him. No one wanted to lose their place beside the king. If he wanted something, someone found a way to make it happen. If he made a mistake, someone covered it. If he refused advice, most people simply stayed silent. At first, that kind of loyalty felt comforting. Eventually, it became dangerous. A man who never hears the truth slowly loses the ability to recognize it. Without realizing it, the people trying to protect Elvis were also isolating him. Every new layer of security built another wall.
Every favor created another obligation. Every act of devotion quietly strengthened the invisible cage around him. Then something changed. The pressure that once came from strangers
Now came from inside his own circle. Money created tension. Success created jealousy. Influence became a silent competition. Who had Elvis's attention? Who could speak for him? Who controlled access to him? Questions like these slowly poisoned relationships that had once seemed unbreakable. No one shouted, no one declared war. The damage happened in silence, one conversation at a time, one disappointment at a time, one secret at a time. Elvis could feel it. The smiles around him no longer felt the same. Trust became uncertainty. Comfort became suspicion. Even moments of happiness carried a strange weight. The king was surrounded by more people than ever before, yet he had never felt more alone. What made it even more tragic was that Elvis still believed he could hold everything together. He believed loyalty would survive fame. He believed love would survive success. He believed the people closest to him would never let him fall. He was wrong. Because while Elvis was desperately trying to protect the kingdom he had built, cracks were already spreading through its foundation. And the next crack wouldn't come from money. It wouldn't come from business. It would come from the one place Elvis believed was still safe: his own heart. The woman he loved was about to face the same impossible choice as everyone else in his life: love the man or survive the legend. And when that choice finally arrived, nothing inside Graceland would ever be the same again. Every empire eventually reaches a moment when it begins to collapse from within. For Elvis Presley, that moment didn't arrive with a single phone call or one devastating betrayal. It arrived quietly, so quietly that almost nobody realized the king was already losing the final battle of his life. By the early years of the 1970s, the applause still sounded the same. The theaters were still full. The headlines still called him the king. From the outside, nothing seemed different. But behind closed doors, everything had changed. The marriage that once gave him hope was slipping away. The friendships he believed would last forever were beginning to crack. The people who had once promised unconditional loyalty were starting to choose sides. Some stayed because they loved Elvis. Others stayed because they needed Elvis. And by then, even Elvis no longer knew the difference. Every morning became harder than the one before. Every night seemed longer. The silence inside Graceland grew louder than the cheers outside its gates. There were moments when the old Elvis suddenly returned. He would laugh, tell stories, give away expensive gifts to complete strangers, sing with the same unbelievable passion that had once changed the world. Those moments gave everyone hope. They made people believe everything would be all right. But they never lasted, because after every smile, there was another long night. After every performance, another lonely room. After every standing ovation, another battle nobody could see. The greatest tragedy wasn't that Elvis was surrounded by enemies. It was that he was surrounded by people who couldn't save him. Some were afraid to challenge him. Some believed tomorrow would be different. Some convinced themselves he simply needed rest. Others refused to believe the legend standing on stage could possibly be falling apart. So the machine kept moving. Another concert, another tour, another appearance, another promise that everything was under control. But nothing was under control anymore. Not his body, not his emotions, not the life he had spent years trying to hold together. The world saw a king. Elvis saw a man disappearing. And perhaps that was the cruelest part of all. He knew something was wrong. He could feel himself changing. He could see the distance growing between the man he had once been and the man staring back at him in the mirror. But sometimes, knowing the truth isn't enough to escape it. Because the prison surrounding Elvis had never been built with locks. It had been built with expectations, with contracts, with fame, with fear, with loyalty that slowly became dependence. By the time he wanted his freedom back, freedom no longer knew how to find him. Then came the morning that shocked the world. News spread across America within hours. The king was gone. Millions cried. Fans gathered outside Graceland. Flowers covered the gates. Radio stations played his songs without stopping. The world believed it had lost the greatest entertainer who had ever lived. But perhaps the greatest tragedy wasn't the day Elvis Presley died. Perhaps the greatest tragedy was how long he had been fighting alone before anyone truly understood. History would blame many things: his health, his exhaustion, his personal struggles, his relationships, his choices. Each of them tells part of the story, but none of them tells the whole story. Because Elvis Presley wasn't destroyed by a single mistake. He was slowly broken by years of pressure, years of expectations, years of giving every piece of himself to the world until there was almost nothing left for the man behind the legend. That is why the story of Elvis Presley still matters. Not because he became one of the greatest performers in history, but because it reminds us that applause can hide pain, success can hide loneliness, and the brightest spotlight in the world can cast the darkest shadow. The world will always remember the king, the voice, the music, the white jumpsuit, the unforgettable performances. But behind every standing ovation, there was a man searching for something fame could never give him: peace. And perhaps that is the saddest truth of all. Elvis Presley conquered the world, but in the end, he could never conquer the invisible war inside his own life. Because some legends are not remembered for the way they rose. They are remembered for the price they paid to reach the top. And Elvis Presley paid that price until there was nothing left to give.